Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So there are some written questions, but I'm happy to take oral and oral questions. But let me look to see what's here. Sometimes I can hear people better than I can read their writing. He says, Hari Om Swamiji, what is the role of vasana in samsara? I have to say, it may come as a surprise to people. I met Swamiji in 1981. I spent thousands of hours listening to him, live or tapes. I've never heard him once say the word vasana. Now I take that back, because if you look at the Shankara Bhashya, the commentary by Adi Shankaracharya, if you can grep, anybody know what grep is? you can search it for vasana. And as far as I can recall, the only time it comes up in the commentary, so Adi Shankaracharya was the author of the oldest existent commentaries on the Prasthanatraya, the Brahma Sutra, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Upanishads, right? So most authoritative source that there is for the sampradaya and for the teaching methodology. And the only place he mentions vasana is as the stuff that dreams are made of. Not in terms of, oh, my dreams are made of, the desire to go to France. It's the vasanas that form the stuff that you dream about. As far as I know, that's, I haven't read all the Bhashya, but you can search it, the Sringeri site. Sringeri site is beautiful. Sringeri Mata site, because they had the entire Prasthanatraya and Prakarana Granthas, all the primary texts and secondary texts and the commentaries, and you can search. You have to know Devanagari, and it'll take you there, and it'll show you all the times things are cited. So, Shankaracharya is often quoted that Atma is Nitya Shuddha Buddha Svabhavaha, meaning Swarupaha. And I was curious, how many times did he say that? I searched for it, and I think it was 11 times. He had mentioned that 11 times, right? Atma is free of time. Atma is Nitya Shuddha, ever pure. Nitya Buddha, ever awake. Nitya Mukta, ever liberated, right? You search for the word jnana, knowledge, or vidya, thousands and thousands of times. He mentions samadhi yoga. That's his term for Ashtanga yoga, from the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, the Yoga Sutras written by Patanjali. He mentions samadhi yoga. He says, yeah, that's a place for it. Yeah, it's useful to gain the quietude that comes from those practices. But he mentions it sort of in passing. Look at the number of times he talks about avidya, right? Vidya or avidya, jnanam or ajnanam, knowledge and ignorance. Pujya Swamiji never taught vasana. So I don't know the answer to this question. Pranam Swamiji, through constant contemplation of the mithya of this body, mind complex is understood. Atma, that is myself, is peaceful, ananda, prem, swarupa. But why the internal cheerfulness, happiness doesn't come naturally? So, Atma, the words that are used for Atma as the very swarupa of Atma are Sat Chit Ananda, existence and awareness and Ananda. And these are not attributes of the self, they are the same vastu, the same entity looked at from different perspectives, ontologically and epistemologically and whatnot. And those correlate to Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma from the Taittiriya Upanishad, right? So the same similar three words are used to describe Brahman and to describe Atma, to describe the wave water and to describe the ocean water, right? Because they're not two separate things. When the Taittiriya Upanishad says Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, Brahma is Satyam, true, Satyam, truth. What is true is Trikale Vitishtati, that which abides in all three periods of time. The only thing that doesn't come and go is Sat, existence itself. So those two correlate. And then Jnanam, knowledge. What's the swarupa of knowledge? Awareness. You can't have knowledge without awareness, right? And so those two correlate, the definition of Atma and the definition of Brahman. And then we have two distinct words. We have Ananda, when referring to the self, and Ananta, when referring to Brahman. Ananta means that which has no limit. And so we usually think that existence is limited, right? The existence is, as I was talking about today, existence is an attribute of the table, right? We have notions of limited existence. And so this word ananta, anantyam, anantata, anantatvam, the limitlessness, is that word is there to remove any limited notions we have about existence. And so to jnanam, or awareness, we have limited notions of awareness. We think that awareness is synonymous with the manasa vyapara, the activities of the mind, etc. And we need to remove the appearance of limitation to get to this of awareness, to see that awareness is actually limited, because nothing can limit awareness, because nothing can objectify awareness, right? You can't bring awareness out and objectify it to say, oh, there's awareness right there. Because who would be the one a awareful person would be the one who is attempting to objectify awareness. And nothing can bifurcate. Achedyo yam adahyo yam kledyo shosha evacha. The Atma is not subject to objectification, so there's nothing that can chop awareness in half. And so this word ananta helps remove, and it's a whole, there's beautiful, beautiful bhasha on this section of the Taittiriya Upanishad. And then also the Taittiriya Upanishad has this analysis of Ananda Vichara. And it's very detailed analysis. And it actually presents Ananda in three levels: Priya, Moda, Pramoda. And in terms of happiness, you can translate it as happiness there. In the Taittiriya Upanishad, it says, Priya, Moda, Pramoda. Think of when you see something on Amazon, and you desire it, and you order it, that's Priya, right? You know what you want, and you have the expectation that it'll come, right? You don't have it, you're not experiencing it, but there's, anticipating the arrival of what you desired triggers a lot of dopamine in your system, and dopamine is, is a sense of, gives you a sense of, that happiness. And then Priya Moda. Moda is when you can track the UPS truck or the Amazon truck, and you get a notification that it's on your doorstep, right? And you ring it and, I have it. But you haven't opened the box yet. Priya Moda. And Pramoda is when you actually open it up and have no buyer's remorse, and you're happy with whatever widget you just bought, whatever doohickey or thingamajig, all these technical terms. But the word ananda is problematically translated as, I think I've said before, is as bliss. And the problem with translating ananda as bliss is that Atma is stateless and ever-present. Bliss is a state of mind which comes and goes, right? And so those who think that ananda is the nature of the self, when the mind is not blissed out, then the Atma is somehow far away. Atma is the ever-present awareness which illumines the presence of a blissful chitta vritti, a sukha vritti, a happy thought, and Atma is equally present, illumining a dukkha vritti, a sorrowful thought, right? So if we think that we're closer to Atma when we're having a blissful thought or a happy thought, then we become spiritual samsaris. I didn't make that term up, but I think it's very useful. We're chasing a new experience. And moksha is not a new experience. Moksha is not an experience that happens to you. You don't see bright lights and you don't float up off the ground. Moksha, you don't need a new experience. For moksha, you need to understand the truth of your current experience, because Atma Chaitanya is never away from your current experience, right? Ever present, ever shining awareness. You can't get away from. Just try to get away from yourself. Try to change Atma. You can't. You can change your mind, you can change your heart, you can change your oil in your car. You cannot change Atma. And you can't get away from Atma. Sorry. You're just this far away from moksha. So Ananda is often, the way Puja Swamiji would teach it is that it's synonymous with Ananta, right? It's limitlessness. But also, it presents the value proposition for moksha, right? The value proposition for moksha is tripti, is satisfaction, a contentment, an acceptance and a contentment, a fullness. We call it purnatvam. Right, Purana means full, and Puja Swamiji would give the example of you can fill a glass so full of water that it actually, because of the surface tension of the water, it actually goes above the rim, right? So full that you just can't get any more full, right? And so that's what moksha is. Moksha is putting you in tune with the source of all happiness and love, right, and contentment. But there's a difference between vritti ananda and swarupa ananda. Vritti ananda is the happiness you feel when the mind relaxes, right? When I get an object that I desired, then the duality between the desirer and the desired goes away, and I'm just content, And when you get a desire, the mind just relaxes and your natural state comes out. As I was mentioning, I think ananda, contentment and happiness is our natural is our swarupa, because if our true nature was dukkha, was unhappiness, then we'd be perfectly happy being unhappy, and that's not the case, right? And ananda, happiness comes easily. Well, happiness comes relatively easily to jnani, because, who wants to be a grumpy jnani? When you have no agenda with the world and you carry your own source of happiness with you, then cheerfulness generally comes. We'll talk about why it doesn't come in a moment. But if I have 100 desires, you'd think that if only one of them was satisfied, I'd only be 1% happy. But that's not true. I get one desire fulfilled, and I'm totally happy in the moment, right? For some time. And then I need more, right? It's like feeding the monkey on my back. They talk about an addiction, right? As a monkey on the back. And that's what we have. We have this we're always seeking whatever can trigger our happiness. And really the mind just, at a moment of happiness, there's a shanta vritti, the mind just relaxes and your true nature just comes out. And so that's how happiness is presented. And we all want that. So jnani has more immediate access to a cheerful disposition, right? Puja Swamiji say that compassion and acts of generosity, expressions of love, are dynamic expressions of one's ananda swarupatvam, an expression of one's true nature, right? But vritti ananda is a transient phenomenon, right? That your swarupa ananda is your very source of yourself, and it is your very self, and it's always there for her access if you know the truth of yourself, right? It would be very dysfunctional if a jnani was just totally speechlessly blissed out, Once I was in Anakati. I mentioned Radha. Did I tell about Radha? She was the first student. She was the first teacher that, when Puja Swamiji came to Santa Barbara, I studied with him. I saw him. And then one of his senior students, she was planning on moving to Santa Barbara, and that's why I'll tell the story tomorrow. but she was planning on moving to Santa Barbara, so she brought Swamiji, and he gave some talks. We saw. And so we studied with her for a while. And I saw her in Anikati at the Gurukulam there, one of Pujya Swamiji's Gurukulams, right? He has an ashram in Rishikesh, and then these 2 Gurukulams, and then there's another satellite Gurukulam in Nagpur. And I saw her there. And the immediacy of the vision was so clear that I was totally blissed out. I don't know if that's a California saying, but I felt like I was floating on the air, right? And it just, no matter what thought came, it was just incredible. And I went to her and I mentioned, we talked once in a while, I told her this, and she said something very wise. She said, "Don't worry, it'll pass." And I knew that, but I was questioning, well, should I revel in this? It's just a passing phenomenon. She said, yeah, it's fine. When it comes, it comes. When it goes, right? So it's not to say there aren't these very beautiful states of mind that come. When you have a deep meditative experience, it can be very exquisite and subtle and beautiful. So the Vritti Ananda is passing, but the Swarupa Ananda is ever present. But why doesn't the inner cheerfulness and happiness doesn't come naturally or doesn't stick? So there is a provision, a state through which one on the way to Jnana Nishtha passes. It's called Sapratibandhaka Jnanam. So Pratibandha is Sapratibandhaka is a knowledge with obstructions. And obstructions are those things, those tendencies of the mind, the deep samskaras we may have, where the mind naturally falls into these old ruts of thinking that keep the knowledge from becoming my living reality, right? And it's particularly intense, the samskaras, the ruts or the grooves that the mind naturally falls into can be very deep, and they seem to be linked to childhood trauma. If you grew up in a dysfunctional household where you were abused or your parents were alcoholics, that creates a very deep samskara that many people have to work with to free themselves from. Sometimes it's so deep that you can't free yourself. And so maybe there are these, the world still triggers your reactivity, right? Or you don't find that cheerfulness or happiness is easily available. You can still have the jnana. There's sapratibandhaka jnana. But the more that, and this is why this notion of samskara, I've never heard that Pujya Swamiji talk about it this way, but I recommend the practice of mantra japa throughout the day. When I was given sannyasa, you go and do the ritual, and then down at you chant all night, offering into the fire. You chant the Gayatri mantra, and then you go and do the ritual at the Ganga, and you come back, and Swamiji gives you a name and a mantra, a sannyasi mantra. I can tell you one of the sannyasa mantras is Om, because the Gayatri mantra. If you haven't memorized your entire Veda, which everybody should recite daily, then it's sufficient to recite the Gayatri. But when you take sannyasa, you break your yajnapavitam, your sacred thread. You're no longer qualified to perform Vedic rituals. You have done your own shraddha. Part of the sannyasa diksha is you do your own death ceremony. You take up all your clothes, in the Ganga, and your yajnapavitam, your sacred thread, goes downstream, and the whole historical jiva just floats downstream. Anyway, so we're in the room, and so a sannyasi. There's 2 mantras that a sannyasi can take. One is Om, because just as the entire Veda is subsumed within the Gayatri mantra, because the sannyasi doesn't need to do that anymore. That's for a brahmachari. The whole Veda is subsumed into this simple Omkara. And in fact, Pujya Swamiji said, not for a grihastha should not just chant Omkara. He says Omkara means the syllable Om, because he said, if you chant Om, you'll want to become a sannyasi. I used to use Omkara before Pujya Swamiji gave mantra diksha. I used to chant Om. And someone heard of that, and Pujita Swamiji called me in. Because I was not, this was ages ago, I was not ready for sannyasa at all. And he recommended that I don't do that. Because, he said, you might become a sannyasi. So they say for a grihastha, it should include the name of Ishvara, like Om Namah Shivaya, or Om Namo Narayanaya, Om Namo Bhagavate, or just Ram, Ram, Ram. Anyway. So Omkara is perfectly fine. Om is perfect for a sannyasi. And I can't tell you what the other mantra is. But because then you'd be halfway to sannyasa. But he did say, this in passing, said, I don't bring this mantra to mind, but it comes unbidden. It just comes. I've done it so much that it just comes in a free moment. It just comes. He doesn't tell people do mantra japa. He did tell me. So before you take sannyasa, he gave me brahmachari diksha, right? An initiation into the Gayatri mantra. I was like 50 years old or something. Most kids get it like 12 or something like that. And he told me, you should do this. You should chant this Gayatri mantra. It's not short. Om Bhurvavasvaha Tat Saviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. He said, you should chant that 1,000 times a day. And I did, right? Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful practice. So he shows the value for it, but he doesn't tell people, do japa constantly. And just the fact that he said, it just comes naturally to me, implied that he had done it a lot. And it's not like, oh, okay, I have 10 minutes in the morning. I'm a japa nishta. I'm one who's committed to doing japa in the morning. So I have to get through my 108 beads before I go to work. Om Namah Shivaya, 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 right? It seems like it's better to chant Om Namah Shivaya 5 times in a spacious mind than to be result driven, right? Target driven, say, oh, okay, I need to do it all this time, right? 108 times. But it's a beautiful practice. So when the mind is not busy with anything else, right, where does the mind come back to? Does the mind come back to something sacred, or is it lost in some samsarika thought, some problematic thought? And so when you do japa throughout the day, when you're washing dishes, why not? When you're stuck in traffic, why not? Right? If you have a free moment when your mental CPU cycles are not problem solving something, then not churning something, then come back to yourself. So initially, it's a great tool for a karma yogi, because a karma yogi is meant to turn their life into a prayer, to appreciate the omnipresence of Ishvara through, as I mentioned in a satsang, other satsang, through Ishvara prasada buddhi, Ishvara arpana buddhi, right? Seeing that everything that comes is grace, and everything you do is a offering to Bhagavan. You use the duality between the jiva and Ishvara to sanctify your life, to understand that you are never separate from the sacred. All of your experience is completely saturated with the sacred. Because unlike Hinduism, Sanatana Dharma is not polytheistic. We don't believe in many gods. This is Pujya Swamiji saying. And it's not monotheistic. We don't believe in one God. We don't say there's one God. We teach that there is only God. So one of the duties of a karma yogi, Sri Dakshinamurti, one of the duties of a karma yogi is to release Ishvara from the mandir. If you think you go to the mandir and you see Ishvara, and after that, when you're on the golf course, Bhagavan's not there, you have another thing coming. you need to think about that, right? There's nothing here but Bhagavan, right? So we take a very parochial, limited notion of Bhagavan and use that. That's fine. You go to the temple, more power to you. But we want to, as Swamiji would say, Ishwaraize our life, meaning recognize that there's nothing separate from the sacred, right? Using the water wave ocean example, what wave form is separate from the ocean? None. Every wave is part and parcel of the ocean, right? No wave is separate from the ocean. No individual, no phenomenon is separate from the totality. The Vyashti Upadhi is part and parcel of the Samashti Upadhi. The microcosm is part and parcel of the macrocosm. You as an individual, even shy of Atmajnanam, are never separate from Ishvara. This Stula Sharira is part and parcel of Ishvara's Stula Srishti. The physical body is part and parcel of the physical body. Your Sukshma Sharira is part and parcel of the totality of the subtle world, if you want to talk about it that way. And then, we recognize that even oceanness and waveness are forms superimposed upon one water. So too, all of this variegated phenomena is really evanescent, and it relies on the only thing that has true being, which is Brahman, which is Atma. Right? So we look, the wave water we call Atma, the ocean water we call Brahman, but there ain't no two waters, there's just one water. And so Karma Yoga is meant to Ishwarize all experience. I used to do this when I worked in Cubicle City in high tech. Sri Dakshinamurti was my Ishta Devata, the Murti that I worked with, and I did puja too and whatnot. And Sri Dakshinamurti is the guru, Ishvara as guru. And if Ishvara is everything, then I would see people in my work environment as Bhagavan, and if they come to me, I can learn lessons. Ishvara comes as a guru. So if someone comes into my cubicle and says, your team did a great job, the software was released without a hitch, the software is perfect, yeah, right. It came in on time and under budget with high quality, good luck with that one. You can't have all three of those in a project if you know anything about project management. I would say, tatastu, right? It's all grace. What did I have to do with it, right? I contributed what I could, but the result was not my direct. All I could do was my direct result. All I could do was pull back the arrow, aim, quieten my breath, and release. And then it's all daivam. It's all Bhagavan's grace. And then when someone came to the cubicle and said, your team broke the build, we're not able, I'm talking in high-tech terms, you broke the software, we can't release it, we're behind schedule, we're overcost, and the quality is horrible. Hey, Bhagavan, what a lesson. It may be absolutely true. And maybe something I really needed to attend to, but it's all a lesson. So if you see Ishvara as the guru, everybody is, I hope this isn't offensive to everybody is Sri Dakshinamurti in drag, right? Everybody who comes to you, right? And so you can use that attitude to grow, to understand that you live in a world and this upadhi is imperfect, and you do what you can and offer the rest to Bhagavan, right? And what one practice that helps that attitude is mantra japa. Right? Whatever your mantra is, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. When you have a moment, Om Namah Shivaya. You don't want to go into samadhi when you're at a stoplight. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Because it teaches the mind to come back to something sacred, even if it is a dualistic sense of the sacred. And it builds a sacred samskara. Again, I've not heard Puja Swamiji talk about this. It's just coming from the silly California thought process, Swami thought process. But it helps to supplant the other samsaric ruts that are in there. And so if you build the habit to mentally come back to something sacred through the practice of japa, I used to have a little quarter, not 108 mala, but a quarter mala. You know Neem Curly Baba? Yeah. People know? Yeah. Somebody, when I was just out of high school, one of my teachers of a junior college, I was taking Latin at a junior college of all things, because I couldn't find a Sanskrit teacher, and Sanskrit and Latin are very similar. And one of the teachers there gave me this tulsi bead mala, and the thread from in that mala was a thread from the blanket of Neem Karoli Baba. And I said, how beautiful. On the way to Rishikesh, there's this huge Hanuman. He's a great Hanuman Bhakta, very beautiful sage. And so I would walk around doing this all the time, just to keep it going. Once your mind comes back, gets in the habit of getting into the groove of coming back to something sacred, once the jnanam starts to become clear, then the groove of a dualistic relationship with the sacred is now augmented. You come back to yourself. In a free moment, someone who knows the self, the mind will naturally come back to the self, right? Because you're Ananda Swarupa, where there's no better place to be, right? And so you can come back to this vision. And as there's this term called Brahma Abhyasa, practice of Brahman. How the heck do you practice Brahman? But this is it. Pauna punyenam shravnam kuryat. May you listen again and again, because every time you listen to the teaching, it deepens that jnana samskara. Again, I don't know how problematic that terminology is, but that's how I think about it. It deepens it anchors this knowledge more firmly again and again in your mind. And a japa can do that. You create the habit of coming back to something sacred, and in the end, you are the most sacred thing here, because you are not separate from Brahman. And so it can build a very devotional attitude, disposition, bhavana, and it create a very contemplative disposition. To revel, to hold this, for this knowledge to become your very own, and to hold it so comfortably and naturally in your mind and in your heart, a contemplative disposition is absolutely invaluable, right? And that's why people take sannyasa, to get rid of all the other distractions, right? Someone who's a sannyasi has chosen a life of deliberate simplicity. And in other traditions, like Roman Catholic monasticism, a monk is called a contemplative, because that's the job description, right? Stay with the Shruti, stay with the teaching, contemplate on it until it becomes so obvious that it's your living reality. Imagine our friend Devadatta, who finally, he realized he was a 10th man, and maybe he forgets. Maybe somehow, for some reason, some micro, problem in his mind, blood clot in his brain or something, he forgets. And so he's told again, you are the 10th man. Stop worrying, you are the 10th man. But that becomes his living reality, and that knowledge informs his experience, right? And so at any time, it's kind of a silly example, but whenever he wants, he can bring his mind back to, I am the 10th man, In that situation, problem solved, hopefully it won't come back again. But the thing is that we're habitual samsaris. The world is always telling us who we are. The world of commercials is always telling us how inadequate we are, trying to sell us something, right? Our relatives are always telling us who we are, right? The world is always filling in who we are. And it takes a bit of a distancing and a vairagya to really sit with this. And so that's why some people take some sannyasa. Swami Advayatmananda was visiting the Gurukulam in Anakati one time, and when I was there, and Brahmachari asked him, "Do you need to become a sannyasi to be a jnani?" And I don't remember exact words, but he said, if you can gain Atma Jnana Nishtha without it, then more power to you. That's my California, translation. Basically, because the contemplative attitude conduces very well to this Jnana Nishtha. And if you have pratibandhas to your knowledge, the practice of japa helps. Coming again to this teaching helps. Sometimes you could have such a deep samskara that it can't be cleaned up, it can't be altered, right? It's so deep in your psyche that the mind naturally comes. But what's the problem? It's not you, right? So because you illumine a non-cheerful mind as well as you illumine a cheerful mind. Some people feel that the goal of spirituality is to be continually inspired, right? People revel in inspirational stories. Oh, this yatra was so inspirational. This meeting with this holy person was so inspirational. Atma Chaitanya equally illumines an inspired mind and an uninspired mind. You are no further from the truth when the mind is uninspired. You may be less motivated in a variety of ways, but inspiration comes and goes. In whose presence does inspiration come and go? Now, that being said, the more sattvika your disposition is, right, the purer your mind is, the less your ragas and dveshas have a hold over you, the more you naturally can find a spacious, equanimous heart and mind. You know, this knowledge rests quite comfortably in a spacious heart and a spacious mind. We gain knowledge in the buddhi, but it's all as though we live our life through the heart. Most spiritual progress is really emotional growth, really, right? And many of us have these inner wounded children that it might behoove us to listen to help clear that out. So having inner child work, Jungian inner child work can be very powerful in personal transformation. Because when I look out in the world sometimes, in the political arena or in the business world, it seems like everybody is 8-year-olds on the playground, right? They seem to have the bhavana of some little some little kid that we would just laugh at, but unfortunately, my goodness. And so that's partly because there's wounds in our heart. And so, the Jungian process of inner dialogue and visualization, if you give these wounded inner children a voice, then it helps relieve the knots of emotion that cause a natural cheerfulness not to actually come and express in your life. In time, if you revel, if you do enough, if you understand clearly enough, then a natural cheerfulness will come. And if it doesn't, it's just apadika dharma, right? Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you're just hardwired. Let's say you have OCD. OCD is, as far as I know, maybe there's some drugs for it. It's generally like behavioral cognitive therapy address it. You learn to manage it. Maybe you can't change it. Maybe you do have to go back and check that you locked the front door 4 times. Yeah, okay, so maybe you can practice Dhamma, control of your karmendras, and only check it 3 times. But what does it matter, right? Unless you're washing your hands until they become raw, sometimes just hardwired. Some people are on the spectrum for one reason or another. You're kind of hardwired that there. Everybody gleefully claims to be autistic. And many of us are, I think, right? I don't think you can be a sannyasi with somehow being on the spectrum. They used to call it Asperger's syndrome, right? To some degree. They've done away with that. But, it takes a curious sort of personality to pursue this and end up dressing like a pumpkin, Halloween's coming up, and I tell people that I often don't wear this, the Swami garb when I'm going shopping for cilantro. I asked Puja Swamiji, when he gave me sannyasa, I said one thing: my mother's ailing, can I care for her after taking sannyasa? And he said, yes, of course. And the other thing I said, well, how important is it to wear the dhoti out in public, in America of all things? I wear it in appropriate situations. When I'm teaching or in an ashram or something. I've worn it to the local organic food store when I was teaching there, giving some classes there, and when I walked in, people thought I was a Hare Krishna or something. You have no clue. So Puja Swamiji said, just wear an orange shirt. Right? So I have a lot of orange shirts. And if you want them to know you're a sannyasi, wear orange pants. But no one would equate orange pants with a sannyasi. So the only time I might get away with wearing this whole Swami garb is on Halloween. Because it would be my costume. And then I could go door to door and say, Bhiksham Dehi, give me alms. Because traditionally a sannyasi should go door to door and beg for alms. So I could beg for orange Tootsie Pops. Anyway, it takes a unique character for somebody to to become a sannyasi. Going back to vasana, the one place I've seen it, the word used in the traditional literature is in the Avadhuta Gita. It said it's due to punya that one is born with an Advaita vasana, an inclination, right? You can see vasana as an impulsivity based on one's ragas and dveshas. That's how you can think about it, you know. But the mind will never become perfect. You as a jiva are always a work in progress, right? And so if you judge yourself, the last advice, almost the last thing that Pujya Swamiji said at the end, I think, of almost every 3-year course, people had intensely studied this, right? And the last advice he gave on the last day, you know, when the ceremonies were going on, he always said something akin to, do not judge yourself by the obtaining condition of the mind, right? And that's words to live by. Okay. Why don't we take, there's one more question here. Why don't we take something from if any of you have any questions? Ganesh will play Phil Donahue. I know none of you know who Phil, some of you know who Phil Donahue is, okay. I feel like I'm schooling my audience in American idioms and references, and some people understand and some don't, and some people go, yes, Swamiji, sure. 42, yes, yes.
Pranam Swamiji, awesome, very grateful to you for showering us with wisdom. I have actually 3 or 4 questions, but I can start with one. In your book, which is a beautiful pamphlets, you mentioned that Shiva is a Parameshwara. You started saying that as Jagat Abhinna Upadan Karan, the non-separate material cause of creation, he is a Parameshwara, the limitless God, and nothing can be separate from which is limitless. And you talk about he's a Satyam and Mithya, the real and the apparent, Karana and Karya, cause and effect, Nirguna and Saguna, free of all qualities and yet manifesting as all Nama Rupas, all names and forms. So in Gita in chapter 15 there is this Purushottam Yoga. So always wondered, is Parameshwara a higher level than Ishvara? Like Purushottam is supposed to be higher than, is the highest possible level. And that's beyond existence, non-existence, knowledge, ignorance, absolutely abstract state. Is that the ultimate goal? I know that we are starting with where we are in dual world, but it's good to know the final destination. Can you shed some light on it, please?
The final destination is here now, here. But you're positing a difference between Ishvara and Parameshwara. No. So Parama just means limitless. Limitless means kala deshu vastu aparichinna, right? Unconditioned, undefined by space, time, or any attribute. And so Paramaha just means, or Param or Paramaha, Para, just means the limitlessness. So Parameshwara and Ishvara are basically synonyms. There's no, I mean, we do, the tradition does talk about different devatas and whatnot, you know, as the functionaries. You know, Surya is the Ravi. Surya is the Ishta Devat. I mean, the presiding deity over the eyes. So there's mantras that say, pray to Surya if you have, you know, cataracts or something like that. And those are just sort of like the ministers, right? But that's a whole different model. It's a very Vaidika perspective. It's a beautiful model. It's a way to appreciate the omnipresence of Ishvara. If you want to anthropomorphize the different aspects of creation, that's fine. It's just another way to look at it. But there's no difference between Ishvara and Parameshwara.
Swamiji, does that, so Ishvara is Brahman with Maya, macro Maya, as Swami Advayatmananda would call. And Brahman is Satchitananda or Satyam Jnanamananda without the totality, the Maya. So Parameshwara is not equivalent to Brahman, the absolute. It's still Ishvara.
I mean, in different tradition, maybe the vocabulary is different. I've never really notice that they use Parameshwara to refer to Brahman. So, Pujya Swamiji was reticent to just blithely say, Ishvara is Brahman plus Maya, because that posits a duality. And it's not true. Because Maya is mithya. Maya enjoys the reality of being mithya. And Maya is just a way to explain where the world came from, how the world came from. So a fanciful etymology of Maya is Yama. So Maya is a feminine Strilinga word, and Yama means that she who does not truly exist. So when we say Ishvara is, you can say Ishvara's upadi is Maya. Or you can say Ishvara's knowledge, the knowledge that we attribute, the sarvajñatvam, does not come from Brahman, but it comes from Maya. And so you can say this entire creation is, Pujya Swamiji so beautifully said, this entire creation is an expression of Maya, right? An expression of Ishvara's knowledge, right? And so that's why there's the imagery of Bijasyantarivankuro Jagridam Prang Nirvikalpam Punaha. In the Sri Dakshinamurti Stotra, there's this image of a pulsating universe, and that just like a seed, in a seed, the seed contains the entire DNA and algorithms to create a giant oak tree. So too, there's this model of a pulsating universe, and when Brahmaji goes to sleep, it's a way of talking about it, the entire creation becomes unmanifest, pralaya. And then when Brahmaji wakes up, it's anthropomorphization of the whole process, So instead of just having one big bang, there's multiple big bangs, if you will. Right? And so when the world becomes unmanifest, the entire world resolves into an unmanifest state. Just like the jiva goes into an unmanifest state during deep sleep. Okay? But in deep sleep, all the algorithms are present to recreate the jiva. During pralaya, when the entire world goes unmanifest, they resolve back into Maya, right? And then Maya has all the ability to be recreated, right? So to create. So when we say that to manifest the entire creation, and so that's what that's what the Sri Dakshinamurti shloka talks about. And I think I started this thought, not finished, surprise, earlier. So Brahman, I mentioned, is a vivarta upadana karana, and Maya is a parinami upadana karana. So the upadana karana means a material cause, right? And so there's a Maya is that which undergoes change to become this entire creation, just like milk turns into curd. Brahman is more like the rope, which is the material cause for the snake, but undergoes no change. And then we also posit a nimitta karana, which is the intelligent cause. And that intelligent cause, we say is Ishvara. In another model, we have Shiva and Shakti. So in that perspective, there's Shiva represents Brahman, and Parvati or Shakti represents Maya, because she's a creative force. Brahman, in that model, Shiva represents Brahman, which is a vivarta upadana karana, the material cause which undergoes no transformation, right? Meaning, what is that? Sat. Sat is everywhere. The existence didn't transform to become this creation. Existence is ever present, but it never changed. It's just isness itself. Due to which we can say the chair exists, the table exists, the body exists, the mind exists, the emotion exists, that astita, that existence, is omnipresent, right? So Shiva represents that ever-present, non-changing material cause of the world, and Parvati Shakti represents the transformational active part. So it's like Shiva is sitting on the couch watching cricket, and Parvati is in the kitchen making the snacks. She does all the work, right? And India won, right?
Yeah.
Not too long ago. So I managed to watch the last 10 minutes of it. I don't know anything about cricket, but I was being schooled in it. The most I'd watched cricket before a few days ago was I had taken a bus to Chidambaram because I wanted to see the beautiful, beautiful temple there. I reveled in the Sahasranama, in the 108,000 names of, that's used during their ritual there. And I wanted to go see it. Beautiful temple. And it was a hot day, very hot, go figure. And I found my hotel, and I turned on the AC, I turned on the TV, and there's a cricket game there. I turned on the AC, I stood in front of it with my back towards it, and my back froze up. And it became almost immovable, right? And it took me about 10 minutes to get from a standing position to laying flat on my back. And for the next 3 hours, I was watching cricket out of the side of my eye because I couldn't move. So up until last weekend, that was probably the most cricket I've ever watched. Let's see if there's anybody else. We can come back to
Just one addition.
Okay.
The Parinami Upadan Karan, that usually means irreversible change, right? Irreversible.
No, parinama just means that which has parinama. Parinama just means a change, a transformation. It doesn't mean irreversible.
Okay. But the concept from the Gita shlok, you said, Nasatu vidyate bhavo. So if that's the ultimate state, nirgun nirakar, like Brahman, then with this description of cosmology, is that just the intermediate step for us to know and practice our act?
So there are a lot of things that are in that one sentence that might need clarification. Nasato vidyate bhava is not a state. It's an ontological statement. It's a statement of reality. There is no true being for that which is mithya, and there is no non-being for that which truly exists. And those who know the truth know that. Okay, so with that, that's what first caught my attention. And then continue, you said, is that a state to be achieved?
Well, that's the goal, ultimate goal, to be in that state.
No. Atma is stateless. What needs to happen is a recognition of the stateless Atma. You can make a state transition diagram of the states of mind and the states of heart. That's what we were getting at with the meditation, where you visualize an elephant, you visualize a tree. The state of mind changes. There's no state to be achieved. It's the recognition that Atma is inherently stateless. Regardless of the state of experience, a chittavritti, a thought form, is formed by visual perception or auditory perception or the sense of taste or smell or whatever, right? You can think of those as thought forms, which Atma illumines as awareness. But there's states that you can reach in terms of deep meditation. That's a state of mind. But Atma is stateless. So it's really a recognition of the ever-present statelessness of Atma rather than the goal being to achieve a state.
And the only reason we are not knowing that from Shabda Praman, as you mentioned, is because we have avidya to overcome.
Shabda Pramana is a means to remove that self-ignorance. And it needs to be removed through Shabda Pramana. So the knowledge that's gained through language is called Shabda Prama. Shabda is an adjectival form of Shabda. Shabda means language or words. And Prama means knowledge that we gain through a Pramana. So Pramana is a means of knowledge, but we can't gain Atmajnanam through the traditional other 5 means of knowledge, like perception or inference. The Shruti is considered a means of knowledge which the guru wields, right, to lead the student to that understanding. And so through that ignorance of the self is said to be removed, and that's why we always talk about the 10th man. Because you say, doesn't language just give an indirect knowledge? How can you say language gives direct knowledge? That's the supposition. And so people say, oh, well, if language gives knowledge, it must be paroksha jnanam, it must be indirect knowledge, so all the texts that I'm reading are just giving me the recipe, and then I have to go make the dosa, right? There's this theory-practice approach. That is not how I believe Shankaracharya saw things. That is not how I believe the Shruti is meant to be understood. That is not how Puja Swamiji taught. It's a real-time unfoldment because you are here to make a mistake about your true nature. You are here, therefore, to inquire into who you really are, and you are here for the truth of yourself to be revealed. And that happens through language, like our 10th man. You are the 10th man is, a novelized way to say Tattvamasi. You are Ishvara. You are Brahman right now. The Mahavakya does not say Tattvam Bhavishyasi. Anybody know what Bhavishyasi means? Yeah, it's a future tense. Yeah. It doesn't mean you will become Brahman if you just do this, or that, right? If you wipe your mind clean, or you stand on your head, or you allow the Kundalini to, pierce your Sahasrara chakra, right? Or you dance wildly as if no one's watching, or you take ayahuasca, or you cleanse your chakras, or chakras as they say. Once you're in the spiritual marketplace, you're very susceptible to all sorts of snake oil salesmen I talked about, right? And so really the knowledge is what it is what we're seeking. And that's because if you don't know remember my Alice in Wonderland story, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. But if you know if the problem of samsara is self-ignorance, then you know the solution is self-knowledge. And tad vijnanartam, as the Mundaka Upanishad said, tad vijnanartam, for the sake of that knowledge, you approach a teacher as a shrotriya who knows a sampradayavit, someone who knows his stuff and is dedicated to this, or for whom this is their living reality. And so if you apply the theory practice model to the Shruti, to your spiritual reading, there's always something to do. It gets the idea of, I'm not pure enough. I'm not holy enough. Look at we put wise people up on a pedestal, and we say, I have students who study and say, I'm not pure enough. I'll never be pure enough. Look at these holy people. It's as if their feet don't touch the ground. I'm not like that. I'll never gain this knowledge. That's rubbish. Offer that idea that you will never gain moksha. This silly notion. Offer that to Bhagavan. Right? You don't need it. What's keeping you from that knowledge? Now, there are practices that will help you gain the wherewithal called adhikaratva, and we talk a lot about why doesn't this knowledge stick? Why does it still seem abstract? And then you may have to clean up your act, quote unquote, if you like. So we talk about sadhana chatushtaya, and there's a whole unfoldment about that. The necessity for viveka, vairagya, shatkotsampatihi, shama, dhamma, upariti, titiksha, shraddha, samadhana, mukshutvam. Too much to go into here, right? But if you look at it, I'm sure you can find some books or Puja Swamiji's videos about that. Sri Krishna talks about increasing your sattva quotient, right? Through karma yoga, neutralizing your ragas and dveshas. Every morning, I was so blessed. Puja Swamiji, there wasn't a temple here. Tadapinanda was here, and as before he took sannyasa, and we had known each other for a very long time. I'll tell stories tomorrow. And he approached Swamiji because there was over there was a tool shed. He said, "Why do we turn this tool shed into a little altar?" Puja Swamiji said, "No, we have to do it. We have to do it right." But so I told Puja Swamiji that I wanted to learn puja, the traditional 16 steps, and he was so kindly, when we were constructing the Gurukulam before the course started, he took me aside and spent an hour with me teaching me, dhupam agrapayami, deepam sandarshayami, right? The traditional 16 steps of the puja. And I did it every morning. You can do puja. It's a beautiful, beautiful ritual. And if you understand it at a skeletal level, then you'll understand what they're doing for an hour. You can do it in 12 minutes or less, right? You don't need the flowers. You can substitute akshata. Put a little turmeric with some rice and you're good to go, right? But it's a beautiful ritual. And so I would do the puja before meditation, and then I'd recite those 5 verses from The Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13. Amanitvam adam vitvam himsak shantararchavam acharyopasanam shaucham stairyam atman vinigraha. So if you, in the bookstore, you find a book called The Value of Values. And that is Puja Swamiji's exposition about these 5 verses, which if you focus on, then it helps you keep them in mind and how you can prepare what's called adhikaritvam. You gain some preparedness to gain and hold this knowledge. And if you do puja, Om Mamo Pata Samasta Duritakshaya Artam Shri Parameshwara Prityartam. What's the sankalpa that you make? What is your intention? You can ask for, I once went to a puja at someone's house, and the sankalpa took like a half an hour. Because if you're going to ask Bhagavan for something and you're doing a ritual, why not ask for everything, right? I kept it simple. I made my own sankalpa, and basically it was, may I have adhikaritvam? May I have amanitvam, etc.? May I have samadhi, etc.? Right? May I have viveka vairagya? May the vision of the sages become mine. I didn't want any punya, so a ritual is said to provide, and then we're running a little late. The rituals are said to create punya, right? Give you blessings, either here or in the hereafter. And pujas are I think of the fructification of karma as your prarabdha unfolds. Your prarabdha is the packaging of your cosmic punya and papa that unfold as the chapters of your life, right? And it's prepackaged. And you die when your prarabdha runs out, right? But you can nudge the expression of your prarabdha a little bit through doing dharmic works or prayers to create more punya. So there's sanchita karma, which is a cosmic karmic bank account. There's the prarabdha karma, which is what you're born with, right? And then there's agami karma, is the karma that is the adrishtapala that you are creating right now. And I think of it a bit like epigenetics, right? You might be born with a certain predisposition, genetic predisposition for certain illnesses, but the expression of those genes can be influenced by your lifestyle. And I think of rituals like that, prayers like that. It can influence. It's just my own crazy idea. It can influence the expression of your punya or papa. And if you do ritual, you're creating some punya, manasa or kayaka or vachika karma, mental or physical or oral prayer has a result, and it's said to give you punya, which are your punya and papa. Punya is, how do you say, your punya brownie points. No one knows what a brownie point is anymore, but the credit, And there's drishta and adrishtapala. So drishta means the immediately experienced result of something. And the adrishtapala is the unseen result. So back in the day, Taco Bell, actually, still, you can get a very, very, very mediocre but vegan bean burrito at Taco Bell. So one night, I don't know where I was, this is decades ago, I got in line for a vegan bean burrito. And some fellow came up to me and said, he looked homeless, he said, "I'm hungry. Will you buy me a burrito?" And I said, "Sure, why not? Right, why not? If someone comes up to you and asks, datavyam, it's to be given." I said, "What do you want?" He said, "Well, give me a chicken burrito." Who am I to tell him not to, right? If he wants a dead bird burrito, I'll give him a dead bird burrito. And so I went up there and I got my horrible little bean burrito and at the other side he met me and I gave it to him. The drishtapala, the immediate perceived result of that, he was happy because he went to sleep with a full belly. I was happy because I performed an act of generosity, right? When you perform acts of generosity, you get most of the result, really, and that's the drishta. Drishta means seen, right? The seen, the immediately perceivable result of that was gladness in my heart. technically, from a traditional perspective, that also generated punya, which is the adrishtapala, the unseen result, right? So a nickel's worth of punya got put into my cosmic karmic sanchita bank account. When a mumukshu does a puja, right? You do this. Is he after drishtapala or adrishtapala? A mumukshu doesn't really care. One who wants liberation is really less concerned about those cosmic brownie points, which will translate into a temporary vacation in Swargaloka, in heaven. We don't really care about that. A mumukshu, because that's desire. What's your desire? I want a big house. I want to, pass this test. It's fine, because we don't hold all the cards. So if you have a big test coming, and you've done what you can do, you might as well ask Bhagavan for a little grace, just to kind of help you, help a brother out. But for a mumukshu, one who wants moksha, the adrishtapala, the punya, is really less important than the drishtapala. When I perform a puja, I'm opening my heart to the sacred. I'm inviting the Lord into my heart. May the Lord permeate my entire life. May I have this vision. May I be blessed with the wherewithal to gain and hold this vision, right? And so when you sit and you chant, even chanting Sri Rudram is extraordinary. It's a beautiful, beautiful mantra. The whole thing is one mantra. You can consider it. And it's very, very powerful. In fact, I stayed at an Ayurvedic hospital near Anakati, near Coimbatore once for some reason or another. And I used to go down to the temple at the Ayurvedic hospital and chant Sri Rudram every morning. And the Ayurvedic doctors heard of that, and they told me to stop because it's too powerful. It's gonna stop your healing process. So apparently, the two things you can't do if you're at an Ayurvedic hospital, you're taking Ayurvedic medication or treatments, abhyanga. I think one of the fellow who massaged me broke my rib. That's a whole different story. You're on this hard table, and he's like, okay. You can't stand in the wind, because wind is supposed to have some effect, and you're not supposed to chant Sri Rudram, so it's considered so powerful. But even chanting the Vedas, chanting Sri Rudram is extraordinarily beautiful. Sri Rudram is a Vaidika chant from the Vedas that is one of the first expressions of as though Sahasranama, right? Because it first starts off with Pataye Namaha, right? You are the Lord of this, you are the Lord of that, right? And then it transitions not to you are the Pati of that, you are that. And it lists about 300, things that the Bhagavan is. And if you look at the translation, it's really interesting. You are the chariot maker, you are the chariot driver. Back in the day. You are the bald-headed thieves that come in the night, right? And now we have these 1,008 names of Bhagavan, which are very beautiful to chant. But a mumukshu is more interested in the immediate result, which is really a function of what you bring to it. You can do rituals or puja or japa just mindlessly, and you'll get nothing from it. Maybe, they say if you chant the Gita on Gita Jayanti, you'll get some punya. Sure. But if it's all mechanical, it's not personally transformative, right? So prayer and puja and mantra are meant to be personally transformative practices to create the adhikaratvam so that the vision is steady and a natural cheerfulness comes easily. Somebody said, when we changed this to 7:30, somebody said, oh good, so we can stay till 10:30, they'll give us more time. I don't think so, I think we've had enough. I'm sorry I didn't get to this question, but whoever wrote this, maybe come and talk to me.
Thank you, Swamiji, very much.
And so tomorrow we'll meet, if you're going to Arshabota, meet at the main dining hall at a little before 8, so we can get all the people in the right cars and whatnot. Anything else you want to say about that?
Yeah, there is no meditation tomorrow morning.
Yeah,
so,
that's good.
7:55 we can finish all the breakfast and meet at the dining hall. 3 or 4 cars will be there. And right now we have 15 plus 1, 16 potentially. We'll decide whether we need a 4th car or not tomorrow morning.
Good.
Okay?
And like I said, Swami Advayatmananda says it's public knowledge on his website that he's has some health issues, that ongoing, vertigo-like symptoms that are keeping him from having his regular classes. So there's no guarantee. I asked him a little bit, and he didn't commit to meeting with us. If he was healthy, then we may have had an audience with him, but I wouldn't get your heart set on it. He may introduce me, that's what he said, but it's all a matter of how he's feeling that day. But at least he has a beautiful ashram, and I'll tell some. I've known him since 1981, so I'll tell some stories. I won't tell any stories out of school, as they say. I try to think, well, what can I say? What can I possibly say that he hasn't already said? He's this one-person video production system. And there are no stories that I could tell that that would embarrass him. So I'll share our early times together and some of our experiences here at the Gurukulam back in 86 to 89. And so you hear some of that. I have to warn you, I may tell you how to make dosa again. Just because I love the reaction of all these ammas, their jaw dropping. The only time I got a round of applause here at the Gurukulam was a few years ago when I gave that recipe that I gave you all. And so it's always fun to play with that. So some of you have heard some of the shtick you'll hear there, but it's all fun. It's all fun. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Tat Sat